What would you do if the one person who wanted to destroy you turned their anger toward your child? This is the story of a father in St. Lucia, Florida. A man who stood against betrayal, revenge, and fear. But above all, it's the story of how love can stand stronger than hate, even when the storm is at its worst. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment where you're watching from. St. Lucia, Florida, was one of those towns where the sun always seemed a little brighter, and the ocean waves carried both comfort and mystery. Palm trees lined the roads, their leaves swaying in the coastal breeze. Tourists came and went, taking snapshots of dolphins, sipping cocktails by the beach, and leaving behind their footprints in the sand. But for the people who lived there, life was slower, simpler, and often built on community and family ties. Donovan Blake had chosen St. Lucia as his home years ago, long before anyone knew his name beyond the world of business. He was a man of presence, tall, broad-shouldered, with a kind of face people trusted even before he spoke. He had built an empire through his company, Blake Enterprises, and though many saw him as a man of wealth and power, those who knew him closely understood what really mattered to him. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the boardrooms or the cameras. It was his family, especially his 6-year-old daughter, Anna. Anna was the heart of his life. She had big, curious eyes, a laugh that could light up a whole room, and a way of hugging him that made Donovan believe he could withstand anything the world threw at him. Since her mother had passed away when Anna was just a baby, Donovan had raised her with the help of his sister, Margaret. Margaret, gentle yet firm, had been the anchor in both their lives, keeping the home steady while Donovan balanced business and fatherhood. The Blake estate sat near the edge of town, overlooking the Atlantic. The house was large but not flashy, white walls, wide porches, and big windows that welcomed the Florida sunshine. To Donovan, the estate wasn't a mansion. It was a safe haven. Every night before bed, he'd check Anna's room, watching her sleep with her stuffed teddy tucked under her arm. And every night he whispered the same promise. "You are safe. As long as I breathe, you are safe." But even in places where the sea kissed the sand and the skies burned orange at sunset, storms had a way of rolling in. Storms you couldn't always see until they were upon you. Started quietly. A news article here, a rumor there. Donovan had always attracted attention, both good and bad. Some admired him for building his business without shortcuts, for hiring locals, and for funding scholarships at St. Lucia High School. Others, however, saw him as arrogant, untouchable, a man who carried himself too proudly. And among those others was Victor Malone. Victor had once been a respected man himself. A banker, polished and smooth-talking, the kind of person who made deals over golf courses and cocktails. But the truth behind his charm was darker. He had cut corners, made reckless choices, and when those choices caught up with him, he looked for someone to blame. That someone in his mind was Donovan Blake. It all went back to a scandal 2 years earlier. Victor had been caught in a scheme that nearly destroyed the savings of dozens of families in St. Lucia. Donovan, unwilling to stand by, had provided evidence that exposed Victor's lies. The town turned against him overnight. His career ended, his reputation shredded. He lost his job, his friends, and eventually even his wife walked out. But what burned Victor the most wasn't Donovan's testimony. It was the fact that on the day everything came crashing down, little Anna had been present. Donovan had taken her with him to the courthouse that morning, and when she innocently asked, "Daddy, is that man the one who lied to all those families?" reporters seized on it. Her small voice was quoted in headlines, played over the evening news. In that single moment, Victor felt humiliated, not just by Donovan but by his child. From that day forward, bitterness became his shadow. Life at the Blake estate seemed steady on the surface. Donovan spent his days juggling meetings, charity events, and fatherhood. Every evening, he came home in time for Anna's bedtime routine, reading stories, singing softly, and reminding her of her mother's love. But Margaret noticed the shift in him. She noticed how he stared out at the ocean longer than usual. His jaw tight, his eyes distant. She noticed how his hands sometimes clenched into fists when the news mentioned Victor Malone's name. One evening, while Anna was upstairs drawing pictures with her crayons, Margaret found Donovan in the study, staring at an untouched glass of scotch. "Donovan," she said softly, sitting across from him. "You've been carrying something heavy. What is it?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Victor hasn't let go. I've heard whispers. He's been spotted near St. Lucia again. And Margaret." His voice broke slightly. "I don't trust what he's capable of anymore." Margaret reached across the desk, placing her hand over his. "You can't fight ghosts. But if this is real, if he's truly a danger, you can't carry this alone. Promise me you'll protect Anna with wisdom, not just anger." Donovan nodded, but his heart was unsettled. He knew Margaret was right. Yet every instinct in him screamed that a storm was gathering. Meanwhile, Victor Malone had sunk deeper into darkness. He no longer lived in the polished homes or hotels he once frequented. Now he stayed in dingy motels along the highway, the wallpaper peeling, the air reeking of smoke. He had grown thinner, his suits wrinkled, his hair unkempt. And yet, beside him always sat a man in a suit. No one knew his name, and perhaps he wasn't real in the way most people were. To Victor, he was a voice, a companion who fed his rage and reminded him of everything he had lost. "You've lost the narrative," the man would say coolly, lighting a cigarette. "The recordings that tried to smear Donovan. Exposed as fake. He's more powerful now than ever. If you want revenge, Victor, you must strike where it hurts most." Victor would hesitate. "She's just a child." But the man's tone was razor-sharp. "She is also the symbol that shields him. Remove the symbol, and Donovan collapses." Victor would grip the edge of the dresser, his knuckles white. "And if I can't, then you'll be forgotten." A footnote in Donovan Blake's story. Those words burned. Victor, once a man of status, now saw himself reflected as nothing more than a failure. His bitterness boiled into obsession. And as he sat in his car near the Blake estate at night, watching the lights flicker from Anna's window, he muttered through clenched teeth, "She cost me everything." Back at the estate, Donovan's love for Anna only grew stronger with each passing day. He found himself more protective, more watchful. He arranged for security patrols around the property. He had Detective Harris, a grizzled veteran of the St. Lucia Police Department, visit the estate to discuss precautions. "Mr. Blake," Harris assured him, "will place unmarked vehicles around the property. Plainclothes officers will keep watch. If anyone comes near your daughter, we'll know." But Donovan's voice was steel. "I don't want to know. I want it stopped before it happens. She's 6 years old, Detective. She deserves teddy bears and storybooks, not threats." Harris nodded, his eyes heavy with understanding. "We'll do everything in our power." That night, Donovan stood once more in the doorway of Anna's room, watching her sleep peacefully, her teddy bear tucked under her arm. He whispered the vow that had become his heartbeat. "They will not touch you, Anna. Not while I draw breath." Outside those walls, however, the storm was already gathering force. Life in St. Lucia carried on with its usual rhythm, the sound of waves against the shore and the laughter of children running barefoot on the beach. But for Donovan Blake there was an uneasy quiet beneath it all, the kind of silence that felt too heavy, like the pause before thunder splits the sky. He carried himself as a man who still smiled at neighbors, who shook hands at charity events, and who bent down to tie his daughter Anna's little shoelaces before she ran off to play. But inside him something was tightening, a knot that refused to loosen. It was the awareness that his enemy was not gone, that Victor Malone's shadow had not disappeared into the past but lingered just out of sight. Anna, full of innocence, remained blissfully unaware. To her, the world was crayons, bedtime stories, and the sound of the waves rolling in just beyond the estate. She had no idea that her father sometimes stayed awake long after she had fallen asleep, pacing the hallway, checking the locks on the doors, looking out of the wide windows into the night as if expecting to see something, or someone, lurking there. Margaret would sometimes find him like this, his tall frame outlined by the moonlight. His face troubled but calm, the kind of calm that comes when a man has learned how to carry storms without letting them spill over onto the ones he loves. Victor, meanwhile, was unraveling further. His days blurred into nights, his thoughts turning more poisonous with every passing hour. He watched Donovan's life from afar, sometimes parked on a lonely road where he could see the lights of the Blake estate shining in the distance. He envied that glow, the way the house seemed alive with warmth and safety. His own world was nothing but cold motel rooms and voices that taunted him. The man in the suit, the shadow that spoke in his ear, became his only companion. Sometimes Victor argued with him aloud. Other times he listened quietly as the voice planted seeds of darker and darker plans. "You've lost everything," the voice would whisper. "Because of him. Because of that child. She shamed you. She made you weak in front of the world." "She's just a girl," Victor would mutter, his hands trembling as he gripped the steering wheel. "She's the symbol of his power. Without her he crumbles. Without her, the world sees him as nothing more than a man who failed to protect what mattered most. Isn't that the justice you want?" Victor's breaths would grow heavier, his pulse pounding in his ears. He had once believed revenge would mean restoring his reputation, winning back the respect of the community. But now his thoughts were darker, more twisted. It wasn't about restoring anything. It was about making Donovan suffer the way he had suffered, about tearing out the one piece of joy Donovan still had. Back at the estate, Donovan tried to carry on as if nothing was wrong, but Margaret could read him like a book. One evening, after Anna had gone to bed, she found him sitting at the dining table, a stack of documents spread before him but his eyes staring through them as if they weren't really there. "You're not here," she said gently. Donovan blinked, looking up at her with tired eyes. "I'm trying to be." "You're afraid," Margaret pressed softly. "Not for yourself. For her." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I keep thinking about that day, about how she said those words at the courthouse. She didn't even know what she was saying. She was just a child. But Victor, I saw the look in his eyes. It wasn't just anger, Margaret. It was hate. And hate like that doesn't die. It waits." Margaret reached across the table, taking his hand. "Then you can't face it alone. You've done that too many times before. People help you. Police, security, me. Whatever storm comes, we face it together." Donovan nodded, though his heart still wrestled with unease. He had always been the protector, the one who stood tall no matter what. But now he realized that protecting Anna wasn't just about his own strength. It was about being wise enough to accept help. In the following days, Donovan took quiet steps to strengthen the safety around the estate. He hired additional guards, though they blended in as gardeners or maintenance workers so as not to alarm Anna. He installed new locks, new cameras, new floodlights. To Anna, these were just daddy's silly projects. But to Donovan they were lines of defense, walls against the storm. Detective Harris remained a steady presence, visiting often, his calm voice and sharp eyes a comfort. He reminded Donovan that Victor had been seen in town, though always briefly, like a ghost that vanished before they could act. Harris promised they were watching, that they would catch him before anything could happen, but Donovan's instincts told him not to rely too heavily on promises. He knew the mind of a desperate man, and desperation had no rules. Victor, sinking deeper into obsession, began following Anna's routines from a distance. He knew when she left for school, when Donovan picked her up, when she played at the park near the pier. He told himself he was just observing, just planning, but in truth he was feeding the fire inside him. Each laugh of hers, each small gesture of joy, made his rage burn hotter. How dare she live so freely while he, a grown man, had been reduced to nothing? How dare Donovan walk proudly through town while he had to hide in shadows? The voice in the suit never let him rest. "You're weak," it hissed when Victor hesitated. "Every day you wait, he grows stronger. Every day that child breathes, She reminds the world of your humiliation. Do you want to be forgotten, Victor? Or do you want to be remembered as the man who finally struck back? There were nights Victor could not sleep, nights when he paced in his motel room, sweating, muttering to himself, gripping a photograph of Donovan cut from a magazine. Other nights he drove to the beach, staring at the Blake estate from a distance, the sound of the waves mocking him with their calm. Each time he told himself he would act tomorrow, and each tomorrow slipped into another. But slowly, his hesitation began to crumble. Donovan, meanwhile, tried to focus on giving Anna a normal childhood. He took her to the pier to watch the dolphins, bought her ice cream from the little shop on Ocean Drive, and sat with her on the porch swing as the sun went down. She would tell him about school, about her friends, about how she wanted to learn the piano like her Aunt Margaret. Her innocence reminded him of everything good in the world, everything worth fighting for. But even in those tender moments, his eyes would sometimes drift toward the road, scanning for headlights that didn't belong, for figures that lingered too long. He was living in two worlds, the bright, loving world of his daughter, and the dark, dangerous one of a father preparing for war. The turning point of Section 2 arrived one humid evening in late July. Donovan was tucking Anna into bed when she suddenly looked at him with her wide eyes and asked, "Daddy, why are there men walking around outside our house every night?" He froze, caught off guard. "What men, sweetheart?" "The ones near the trees. They don't come close, but I see their shadows sometimes from my window." Donovan's heart thudded in his chest. He had arranged for guards, yes, but he knew their patterns. The men Anna had seen weren't his. He forced a smile, stroking her hair. "Don't worry about that, Anna. Daddy's just making sure the house is extra safe, that's all." She nodded, satisfied with his answer, and hugged her teddy bear tightly. But as Donovan stepped out of her room and closed the door, his calm mask broke. His jaw clenched, and he marched straight to his study, dialing Harris's number. "Detective," he said, his voice low and urgent. "He's here. He's closer than we thought." That night Donovan stood once more by Anna's window, but this time he was not watching her sleep. He was watching the dark line of trees beyond the estate. His eyes burning, his fists tight. Somewhere out there Victor was waiting. And Donovan knew the storm was no longer approaching. It was here. The air in St. Lucia, Florida, carried a heaviness that summer. The kind of weight you can't see but you feel deep in your chest, like a storm hanging just offshore, waiting for the right moment to crash inland. Donovan Blake woke each morning to sunshine, to the soft sound of the waves and the call of seabirds, but underneath it all, he carried the sense that something was off. The rhythm of his life, once steady and proud, now moved to the uneasy beat of suspicion. Anna still lived in her world of childhood wonder. She ran barefoot through the grass, her laughter ringing across the estate. She colored pictures of dolphins and lighthouses, showed her teddy bear the secrets of her small universe, and asked endless questions about the world. But Donovan, watching her, could not shake the shadow of Victor Malone. That name had become less a man and more a storm cloud, one that threatened to darken every joy his daughter knew. Victor himself was unraveling in plain sight, though only a handful of people saw him anymore. He lived like a ghost in a run-down motel on the edge of town, curtains always drawn, his face gaunt from sleepless nights. He paced, muttered to himself, and listened to the calm, venomous words of the suited man who never left his side. Whether that man was real or only in Victor's broken mind didn't matter. The poison he fed Victor was real enough. "You hesitate, Victor," the man said one night as Victor sat with a pistol on the nightstand, his head in his hands. "Every day you wait, Donovan grows stronger. Every day that child smiles, the world forgets you. You were someone once. You had power. Do you want to be a footnote in his story?" Victor's voice shook. "She's a child. She doesn't even understand." "She doesn't need to understand," the suited man replied coldly. "She is the shield he hides behind. Remove her and he falls." Victor's hands trembled as he gripped the pistol. He wanted revenge more than breath itself, but something inside him still warred with the thought of harming Anna. But each time he thought of Donovan, calm, respected, untouchable, his rage boiled hot enough to drown his doubts. Back at the Blake estate, Donovan's instincts sharpened. He noticed the silence of the night wasn't always natural. The guards reported strange things. The sound of a car idling just beyond the trees, shadows that vanished when approached, faint footprints in the sand near the property's edge. Detective Harris, ever steady, sat with Donovan late into the evenings, planning, watching. Harris had the kind of face carved by years of experience, lines deepened by both laughter and grief. He carried the weight of countless cases, but even he admitted Victor was different. "He's obsessed," Harris said one evening, sipping bitter coffee in Donovan's study. "Men like that don't stop. They don't sleep until they burn everything in their path. The question isn't if he'll make his move, Donovan. The question is when." Donovan looked toward the hallway where Anna's bedroom door was closed, her soft breathing just audible. His jaw tightened. "Then I have to be ready." Harris studied him. "You've got resources, security, influence. But don't let anger guide you. Anger clouds judgment. I've seen it before. Protect her with a clear head." Donovan nodded slowly, repeating words Margaret had told him earlier. Protect her with wisdom, not just fury. But in his heart, he knew fury was already there, coiled and waiting, ready to erupt if Victor dared step closer. Meanwhile, Anna began to sense the tension without fully understanding it. Children notice more than adults think. She asked Donovan one afternoon as they sat on the porch swing, "Daddy, why are there so many people watching our house lately?" Donovan forced a smile. "They're just here to keep us safe, sweetheart. Like lifeguards at the beach. They make sure no one gets hurt." Anna considered this, her small brow furrowed. "Is someone trying to hurt us?" His chest tightened at the question. He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "No one will hurt you, Anna. Not while I'm here." She accepted his answer, but Donovan felt the sting of truth. Someone was trying. Someone very real. Victor's plans grew bolder. He began driving closer to the estate, sometimes even parking near the pier to watch Anna play in the distance. His obsession turned her into more than a child in his mind. She became the embodiment of his humiliation, the proof that Donovan had beaten him. One late afternoon, Victor sat in his car 2 blocks from the estate, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air of the evening. The suited man sat beside him, calm, collected, exhaling smoke from a cigarette. "She's there now," the man said, nodding toward the estate. "So close. All it takes is courage." Victor's hands shook violently on the steering wheel. "She's just a girl. She is the symbol of your defeat," the man interrupted sharply. "Destroy her and you destroy him. Do it, Victor. Do it now." Victor slammed his fist on the wheel, his rage twisting his face. "I'll end this tomorrow." And tomorrow came faster than anyone expected. At the estate, Donovan began to sense the danger tightening like a noose. That night he stood in the doorway of Anna's room, watching her sleep peacefully with her teddy bear under her arm. He whispered into the quiet, a vow only the walls could hear. "They will not touch you, Anna. Not while I draw breath." Outside those walls, Victor's car idled under the cover of darkness. His breath was ragged, his knuckles white as he gripped the wheel. The suited man leaned closer, his voice a whisper sharp as a blade. "This is your moment. Take it. Show him what it means to lose." Victor's eyes burned with hate, his body trembling between rage and hesitation. The storm inside him reached its peak. And just as Donovan turned away from Anna's room, a flicker in the night caught his eye. A shadow at the tree line. Movement where there should have been none. His pulse quickened. He knew. He didn't need confirmation. Victor was here. He moved quickly through the hallways, alerting Harris and the guards. Radios crackled, flashlights swept through the dark. The estate, usually a haven, became a fortress bracing for battle. Anna stirred in her sleep, unaware of the chaos outside her window. Margaret stayed near her, calm and steady, while Donovan and Harris prepared for what was coming. Victor stepped out of his car, the pistol cold in his hand. His eyes were wild, his breath uneven. He muttered to himself, his words spilling like poison. He ruined me, took everything, and she was the spark. The world laughed because of her. The suited man's voice cut through the night. Do it. End it. Become the man you were meant to be. Victor stumbled toward the estate, his body trembling but his rage driving him forward. The storm had finally broken. Inside, Donovan stood tall, his heart pounding but his resolve unshaken. He turned to Harris, his voice steady as steel. He's coming. And in that moment, father and enemy were on a collision course, one driven by love, the other by hate. The night of reckoning had begun. The night in St. Lucia felt strangely brittle, like glass that could shatter at any moment. The air was heavy and damp, and though the crickets still sang and the waves still whispered against the shore, something darker moved beneath it all. Donovan Blake stood in his study, the lights dimmed, his eyes fixed on the monitors that showed different angles of the estate. His body was tense but steady, the way a man stands when he knows danger has finally arrived at his door. Detective Harris was beside him, his jaw tight, his hand resting near his sidearm. The guards were spread across the grounds, radios crackling softly as they checked in with one another. The estate that once felt like a warm home now felt like a fortress under siege. Donovan turned his gaze toward the staircase where Margaret stood halfway up, keeping watch over Anna's bedroom. She wouldn't leave her side. She refused. Donovan gave her a small nod, and though no words were spoken, the message was clear. Protect Anna at all costs. Out beyond the gates, Victor Malone's car rolled to a stop, its headlights cutting briefly through the trees before clicking off. The man inside was a wreck of what he once had been. His hair unkempt, his face pale and drawn, his eyes bloodshot with sleepless rage. He sat gripping the steering wheel, breathing in sharp, ragged bursts, his entire body shaking as though he was at war with himself. Beside him, the suited man lit another cigarette, exhaling smoke with an almost casual calm. This is it, Victor. This is the moment you've been waiting for. Everything you lost, everything he took from you. It all comes back tonight if you do what must be done. Victor's hand hovered over the pistol lying on the passenger seat. His lips quivered. She's just a little girl. The man's voice sliced through the hesitation like a knife. No, she is the shield. She is the reason the world still believes in him. Break the shield, and Donovan Blake is nothing but a man stripped bare. Do it, Victor. Or stay a forgotten failure until you rot in the dark. Victor's teeth clenched as tears stung his eyes. He grabbed the pistol with shaking hands and shoved the car door open. His legs wobbled as he stepped into the humid night, every step fueled by the fire of humiliation that burned deep in his chest. Inside the estate, Donovan felt it. He didn't need the cameras or the guards' radios to confirm it. Something in the air shifted, a tremor that only a father's heart could detect. He straightened his shoulders, his voice steady as he spoke to Harris. He's here. Moments later, the first alarm came over the radio. Movement at the east gate. Another guard's voice cut in, tense and urgent. Donovan moved fast, his strides purposeful as he crossed the hall toward the side entrance. Harris followed close behind, his hand already on his holster. Margaret's voice called from the stairs, low but firm. Donovan, don't. But Donovan didn't look back. His eyes were sharp, his jaw clenched. This wasn't a fight he could send others to finish. This was his fight. Outside, Victor stumbled into view near the east gate, his pistol raised in unsteady hands. The guards shouted warnings, their weapons trained but their fingers hesitant on the trigger. Donovan himself stepped forward, pushing through his own security, his body positioned like a wall between Victor and the house. Victor! Donovan's voice rang out, low but commanding. Stop. Don't do this. Victor's eyes flickered wildly, his chest heaving. He pointed the pistol toward Donovan, though his hand trembled violently. Stay back. Stay back or I swear. His voice cracked under the strain. This ends tonight. Anna, standing in the upstairs window with Margaret's hands gripping her shoulders, saw the commotion below. She pressed her teddy bear to the glass, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. Donovan noticed the movement from the corner of his eye, and instinctively shifted his stance, shielding her from Victor's line of sight. Victor's gaze locked on Donovan. You ruined me, he spat, his voice raw. You took everything. My career, my name, my life. And her, your precious little girl. She was the spark that burned it all down. If she hadn't spoken that day, I'd still have everything. Donovan's voice was firm, unyielding but calm. No, Victor. You destroyed yourself. Your arrogance, your cruelty, those are what ended you. Anna didn't ruin you. She just revealed who you really were. The words struck something deep in Victor, but the suited man's voice echoed sharp in his mind, drowning out the flicker of doubt. Do it. Don't listen. Pull the trigger. End this. Victor's arm shook violently, the pistol quivering in his grip. His eyes darted to the upstairs window, catching a glimpse of Anna's small figure pressed against the glass. Fear and innocence filled her gaze. Not hatred, not judgment. Just a child caught in the storm of grown men's wars. For a moment, humanity cracked through Victor's rage. His chest heaved as if the weight of all his choices pressed down at once. His hand wavered, lowering slightly. Victor, Donovan said, stepping closer. His body still shielding Anna completely. His voice grew stronger, no longer calm but fierce. You will not harm my daughter. Not today. Not ever. If you want to end something, end me. But look at her, really look. She is innocence. She is hope. Do you want your final act to be destroying that? Silence hung heavy, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant wail of approaching sirens. Victor's breathing came ragged. His grip faltered further, the gun lowering bit by bit. His lips trembled as tears welled in his eyes. I just wanted my life back, he whispered, broken. Then it happened. A gunshot cracked through the night. The sound echoed across the estate, sharp and merciless. Victor staggered, his eyes wide with shock as blood bloomed across his chest. The pistol slipped from his fingers, clattering to the ground. Donovan froze, his heart hammering. He hadn't fired. Neither had Harris. From the shadows, the suited man stepped forward, the smoking gun still in his hand. His face calm, his smile cold. Weak to the end, he muttered, his voice dripping with disdain as Victor collapsed to the ground. Chaos erupted. The guards swarmed, Harris barked orders, and the suited man melted into the night with chilling ease, vanishing before anyone could seize him. All that remained was Victor, lying broken on the ground, gasping for breath. Donovan rushed forward, kneeling beside him. Blood stained Victor's shirt, his breaths shallow and ragged. Their eyes met, two men who had once been rivals, now bound by tragedy. She ruined me, Victor rasped, his voice barely audible. Donovan's eyes burned, his hand pressing against the wound though he knew it was futile. No, Victor. You ruined yourself. Victor's eyes fluttered, tears streaking his cheeks. A shudder ran through him, and then he was still. For a moment, the world itself seemed to pause. The guards secured the scene, radios buzzing with frantic voices, but Donovan heard nothing but the pounding of his own heart. He looked up at the window, where Anna's tear-streaked face pressed against the glass. Margaret held her close, shielding her from the worst of the sight, but Anna's small voice could be heard faintly through the night. Daddy! Donovan rose to his feet, his face set, his arms open as he entered the house again. Anna ran to him, her teddy bear clutched tight, her small frame trembling. She buried her face in his chest as he knelt to hold her. "Daddy, I was so scared," she whispered, her voice breaking. Donovan held her close, his hand cradling the back of her head. His voice was steady, though inside his soul still quaked. "It's over now, Anna. You're safe. I promise you you're safe." Margaret's eyes glistened as she stood beside them, one hand on Donovan's shoulder. She had seen men fall apart after nights like this. But Donovan did not fall. He stood taller, his strength not in fury but in love. That night, while the city buzzed with news of what had happened, the failed attack, the shocking death of Victor Malone, the mystery of the suited man, Donovan sat quietly by Anna's bedside. She had finally fallen asleep, her teddy bear still in her arms, her breathing soft and steady. He whispered into the dim room, words meant only for her ears though she was lost in dreams. "You are my light, Anna. And I will protect that light until my last breath." The storm had come. The storm had struck. But within the walls of the Blake estate, love had stood firm. And though scars remained, father and daughter were still standing, unbroken. The night that had torn through the Blake estate finally gave way to silence. No more shouts, no more gunfire, no more trembling footsteps across the yard. Only the chirp of crickets returned, timid at first, then steady, as if nature itself was reminding the world that life goes on even after storms rage. Victor Malone was gone, carried away in the back of a police cruiser. His face had been bloodied, his eyes swollen, but more than his body was broken, it was his spirit. For years, he had fed on anger and bitterness, letting it shape him into something twisted. But when the fight ended, when Donovan's strength and love had pinned him down, Victor looked less like an enemy and more like a hollow shell of a man who had lost everything, including himself. Detective Harris oversaw the arrest. His voice steady, his commands clear. He'd seen countless men like Victor, once full of promise, then eaten alive by obsession. But even with all his years of service, Harris couldn't shake the heaviness in his chest as he watched Donovan stand in the yard, fists bruised, chest heaving, eyes fixed on the window where Anna had been watching. When the last patrol car left and the estate grew still again, Harris approached Donovan. The moonlight caught the streaks of sweat and blood on Donovan's face. "You did what you had to do," Harris said quietly. Donovan didn't respond at first. His eyes remained on the house, on the child inside, as if making sure she was truly still there, safe, alive. Finally, he said in a hoarse whisper, "I never wanted her to see me like that." Harris put a hand on his shoulder, firm but compassionate. "She saw a father fighting for her. She'll remember that." Donovan nodded faintly, but deep inside he worried. Children see things differently. He wondered if Anna would remember the roar in his voice, the violence of his fists, the way the night had stolen her innocence for a few terrifying moments. When he finally stepped back into the house, Anna was awake, clinging tightly to Margaret. Her eyes were red from crying, her small body trembling. Donovan's heart broke at the sight. He crouched down slowly, his voice gentle, softer than it had ever been. "Anna, sweetheart. It's okay now. It's over." She hesitated, her lower lip quivering, then ran into his arms, burying her face in his chest. He held her close, tighter than ever, rocking her gently. He whispered again and again, you're safe, Daddy's here." Margaret watched quietly, tears in her eyes. She had seen many storms in her life, but none like this. And as she looked at Donovan holding his daughter, she saw not just a father but a man who had been tested in fire and come out carrying both scars and strength. That night, Donovan didn't sleep. He sat by Anna's bed, holding her hand as she drifted in and out of uneasy dreams. Each time she stirred, his presence steadied her, reminding her that she wasn't alone. The hours dragged on, the sky outside shifting from black to the faintest hint of gray, until finally the sun rose over St. Lucia, painting the ocean in soft gold. Morning light felt different that day. The estate was quiet, guards still stationed but more relaxed now. The birds sang as if nothing had happened, but for Donovan, everything had changed. He knew the storm hadn't just come from outside. It had torn through his own heart too. He stepped outside at dawn, the air cool and damp. Harris was still there, leaning against his car with a cup of coffee in hand. They stood together in silence for a while, listening to the waves. "Victor will be gone for a long time," Harris finally said. "The courts will see to that. He won't get another chance." Donovan let out a long breath. "It doesn't feel over. Not yet." Harris nodded slowly. "It won't, not right away. For her, for you. These things leave marks. But time has a way of turning scars into stories. And stories can either haunt us or they can teach us." Those words settled deep in Donovan's chest. He realized Harris wasn't just talking about the case. He was talking about life itself. Over the next few weeks, the Blake estate began to heal. The guards remained, though the threat had passed. The town of St. Lucia moved on, whispers fading like ripples in the ocean. Margaret kept her steady presence, guiding Anna with calm reassurance. She told the child bedtime stories about lighthouses that stood through storms, about heroes who fought not with anger but with love. Anna, slowly but surely, began to smile again. Her laughter returned in bits and pieces, first hesitant, then brighter, until one afternoon Donovan heard her laugh as she chased butterflies in the garden. That sound, more than anything, told him they were finding their way back to peace. But Donovan carried the memory of that night like a weight in his chest. Some evenings, he'd sit on the porch with a glass of water in his hand, staring at the horizon, replaying Victor's face, his words, his madness. He wondered if he could have saved Victor once, long ago, when the man still had pieces of his humanity left. He wondered if all men carried a storm inside them, waiting for love or hate to feed it. One night, as Anna slept peacefully and the house was quiet, Donovan spoke softly into the darkness, as if Victor might somehow hear him wherever he was. "You lost yourself to hate. But you didn't take her from me. You didn't win. And as long as I live, I'll make sure she never carries the weight you tried to put on her shoulders." The wind carried his words away, but saying them gave Donovan a strange peace. Months passed. Life returned to its rhythm. Anna grew stronger, her memories of that night softening, replaced by new ones. Days at the beach, painting seashells, laughing with Margaret, sitting in her father's lap while he read her stories. Donovan made sure of it. He filled her world with love so wide and steady that it crowded out the shadows. But sometimes, when the sky turned dark and thunder rolled far out over the ocean, Donovan would feel that familiar heaviness in the air. He would glance toward Anna, safe and smiling, and remind himself that storms may come, but they do not last forever. The story of Donovan Blake and Victor Malone became one that people in St. Lucia whispered about for years. Some told it as a tale of rivalry, others as a tragedy of a man consumed by hate. But for Donovan it was something simpler, deeper. It was the story of a father's love, the kind of love that fights, that bleeds, that refuses to break even when the world tries to tear it apart. And in the quiet moments when Anna curled against him and asked for another story, Donovan would smile softly, kiss her forehead and whisper, "Once upon a time, there was a little girl who was loved so much that no storm could ever take her away." Because in the end that was the truth. The storms of life might rage, enemies might rise, but love, steady, fierce, unshakable, would always have the final word. And that word, spoken through every heartbeat, every sacrifice, every moment of courage, was simple: family.